The tour through Perea. For more than 2 weeks, Jesus, followed by a dwindling group of a few hundred disciples, traveled through the southern part of Perea, visiting towns where the 70 teachers were working. In this region lived many non-Jews. Along the way, Jesus met Abner for the last time, and he advised him to continue his work and not to be distracted by the news that would soon come from Jerusalem. It was an emotional farewell, and Jesus' last words to this Nazarite were, "Son, I know you will be faithful to the kingdom, and I pray to the Father that he may grant you wisdom, so that you may love and understand your brothers." As they traveled from town to town, more and more of his followers left him, so that by the time they reached Jerusalem, the number of those who followed him day by day had dwindled to less than 200. The apostles were concerned. They were about to travel to Jerusalem for the Passover. They knew that the Sanhedrin had issued an arrest warrant throughout Judea, and that anyone who knew where he was had orders to report him. Yet the apostles were less fearful than before. This change in attitude was largely due to the raising of Lazarus. They had concluded that in case of emergency, Jesus would use his divine power and confound his enemies. Despite this belief, a small group of disciples had taken action. In deep secrecy, but with the consent of the apostles Simon Peter and Simon the Zealot, they had ordered 100 swords. On Wednesday, March 29th, the tour of the cities in southern Perea was completed, and Jesus and his followers set out for Jerusalem. They camped that evening in Livias. It was during this night in Livias that more than 100 swords were delivered to them. They were secretly distributed to all followers who were willing to accept them. They hid these swords under their cloaks. Simon Peter was still carrying this sword the night Jesus was betrayed in the garden. Early Thursday morning, before the others were awake, Jesus called Andrew to him and said, "Wake your brothers. I have something to say to them." Jesus, through the omniscience of his divine nature, knew about the swords and also which apostles had accepted these weapons, but he never revealed to them that he was aware of such things. When Andrew had awakened his companions, and they had gathered in a secluded place, Jesus said, "My children, we have been together for a long time, and I have taught you much that is needed for this time. But I would now like to warn you not to place your trust in human defense against the trials and struggles that lie ahead. I have brought you together here to remind you once more that we are going up to Jerusalem, where the Son of Man is already condemned to death. Again, I say that the Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of the religious authorities. They will condemn him and then hand him over to the Gentiles. And so they will mock the Son of Man, even spit on him and scourge him, and they will put him to death. And when they kill the Son of Man, do not be afraid, for I tell you that he will rise on the 3rd day. Be alert, and remember that I have often warned you beforehand." Once again, the apostles were dismayed, but they still could not bring themselves to take his words literally. They simply could not understand that Jesus meant exactly what he said. They were so blinded by the paradigm in which they had been raised about a Jewish Messiah who would rule over a worldly kingdom from Jerusalem, that they simply could not afford to take his words literally. Here before them was a great man who met all their expectations and characteristics of the Messiah they had envisioned. Whatever he said about it was filtered through the belief that this chosen son of David would soon claim his throne. It wasn't until after his death that these bewildered apostles began to realize that the Master had spoken plainly and directly to them, foretelling his crucifixion. In Livias, shortly after breakfast, a few friendly Pharisees approached Jesus and warned him. They told Jesus that Herod was no longer trusting the situation and had become afraid of a popular uprising. They had learned from a reliable source that he had decided to put Jesus to death, just as he had eliminated John the Baptist. They warned Jesus that he was no longer safe in Perea and advised him to flee to another jurisdiction. This was partly true. The story of the raising of Lazarus and the two growing camps at Perea had frightened Herod. However, when he learned that the Sanhedrin had dared to condemn Jesus even before he had stood trial, he also decided to either kill Jesus or drive him out of his territory. In reality, he hoped that Jesus would move to another jurisdiction, as he was not quite sure how to handle Jewish matters. After hearing what these concerned Pharisees had to say, Jesus replied, "Herod and his fear of this gospel of the kingdom are well known to me. But make no mistake, he would much prefer the Son of Man to go to Jerusalem to suffer and die at the hands of the chief priests. He is not eager, now that he has already stained his hands with the blood of John, to also be responsible for the death of the Son of Man. Go and tell that fox that the Son of Man is still preaching in Perea today, will leave for Judea tomorrow, and in a few days will have completed his mission on earth and be ready to ascend to the Father." Then Jesus turned to his apostles and said, "In ancient times, prophets perished in Jerusalem. Now, the Son of Man will also go to the city where his Father's house stands, to be sacrificed there. All this will happen as a result of their fanaticism and religious prejudice that has spiritually blinded them. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone the teachers of truth! How often have I longed to gather your children together, as a mother hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. Behold, your house will soon be left desolate. Many times you will long to see me, but it will not happen. You will seek me, but not find me." After saying this, he turned to those around him and said, "Let us go up to Jerusalem to attend the Passover, and do what is required of us in fulfilling the will of the Father in heaven." The group of believers who followed Jesus to Jericho that day was confused and bewildered. The apostles heard in Jesus' statements about the kingdom only the tone of certainty about its ultimate triumph. They simply could not bring themselves to understand the warnings of impending hardship. When Jesus spoke of rising on the third day, they took this statement as an indication of certain victory. The phrase "the third day" was a common Jewish expression meaning soon or shortly thereafter. And when Jesus spoke of rising, they thought he was referring to the rising of the kingdom. Jesus was accepted by these believers as the Messiah, and they knew little or nothing about a suffering Messiah. They could not possibly comprehend that Jesus would accomplish many things through his death that could never have been achieved through his life.